Hello, everyone. Welcome to our HME Business webinar, The Virtual Staffing Formula for Business Success. I'm Lori Watanabe, the editor of HME Business, and I'm so happy today to welcome Todd Usher as our presenter from Tactical Back Office, who is also sponsoring this webinar. But before we get started with Todd, I'd like to tackle just a few housekeeping items. After our presentation, this webinar will be available to watch on demand on our HME Business website. We'll be taking questions after the presentation, but you can also submit your questions at any time during this webinar. To submit your question, use the Q&A window on the right on your screen. And if you are viewing this on demand, you can still ask us questions. You can submit real-time feedback for our presenter by using the reaction emojis. And finally, if you have technical difficulties during the webinar, we recommend refreshing your browser and also closing any apps you don't need at the moment. You can click on the yellow question mark button at the bottom of your browser window if you do need additional help. And now I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Todd Usher, the founder and CEO of Tactical Back Office. As an entrepreneurial visionary, Todd Usher has a keen ability to identify underdeveloped opportunities in the healthcare and HME industry. As a pragmatic leader, Todd is known for building and nurturing high-caliber teams to drive organizational success. His strategic focus on customer-centric growth has spurred the expansion of every venture he has ever built, particularly through his acute attention to industry trends, needs, and customer engagement. With a rich history of working with several top-tier healthcare organizations, Todd brings a wealth of industry-specific knowledge and a proven track record of applying innovative solutions to complex challenges. So Todd, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. I wanted to review some of the virtual staffing successes that we've had and kind of share some of our formula for that success. And we're going to jump right in with the first slide of what we've done. And I'm going to try not to read the PowerPoint verbatim. I'm going to try to add some color in between some of the bullet points. But as you know, as not only HME providers, but healthcare in general has been under attack between reimbursement cuts and other things over the years. And for us, it started in 2015. 2015 is when in the HME industry, the rural rollout and competitive bid was in full swing. But also during that time, we had some staffing issues, which we've always had. We've always had a turnover rate. Healthcare in general is running at about 40% turnover, no matter what part of healthcare you're in. But then we had the increases from the California mandates in particular, but New York, Washington did the same thing shortly thereafter, and now it's kind of become trendy for the $15 an hour minimum wage. And at that point, if you looked at California's minimum wage in 2015, it was $9 an hour. So we effectively increased a large percentage over a short period of time from $9 an hour to $15 an hour. And today it continues to progress north of $15 an hour. So between the competitive bid and the rollout in 2015 and the government mandates of minimum wage, it was a pretty scary time for us as a business owner, how to manage that. It was very turbulent. And of course, today, if you don't even look back then, today it continues to go from bad to worse. Now McDonald's is making $20 an hour, and that's heavily advertised, and other states are starting to follow suit. There's a healthcare proposal in California. It's actually law, but they postponed the law because of budgetary issues where healthcare workers are going to get $25 an hour. Now, I think there's going to be some minimum size requirements of companies to do that. But nonetheless, our reimbursement doesn't ever appear to be catching up to what kind of pain we're realizing out there with a lot of the minimum wages. Of course, we've always had to deal with high turnover and low retention, and which leads to increased costs for us and decreased productivity because we're always on the run, which creates a lot of high stress for ownership and management. There seems to be a limited career growth in our industry, not very fast anyways, but having a shortage of experienced, skilled staff exacerbates that issue quite a bit. We've always had increased recruitment costs and insufficient training. It always seems to be on-the-job training. And the demand of these healthcare roles impacts everybody. Ownership, work-life balance seems to be a constant battle. And then just the inefficient process of handling orders, taking on new patients, onboarding new patients. Again, these are all issues, and I assume I'm pretty much preaching to the choir. We've all experienced these issues and continue to one degree or another. So what we've done with our different businesses, as we own an HME, we own a sleep diagnostic center. We've moved some of these challenges over to a virtual staffing model. We've owned and operated these businesses by and large about 15 years. And during that time, we've experienced those wages that were rising in California, New York, Washington that I talked about. Our overhead has increased, which of course we've experienced that dramatically over the year, while our profits were plummeting because reimbursement wasn't catching up. You know, I like to tell everybody, you know, I can't raise the price of a hamburger to make up for it. I'm stuck with the reimbursement that I'm given, and I'm in that trap of dependent on what reimbursement is going to give us. So I have to do something on the back end to address that. We struggled to find reliable employees locally. That was still to this day, when positions that we cannot outsource or insource, we have to hire somebody, and that's a revolving door. And I like to say it's about a third, and a third. You know, a third of them are sticking with me, a third of them put in their 8 and hit the gate, and the other third are basically out their way out the door. And that's a constant struggle trying to find reliable employees to keep up with the demands of the business. And then my managers will revolt because they're the ones who have to end up doing the frontline work when nobody else is able to do it. So we needed to go beyond surviving and onto thriving. And how do we do that? We needed to make a change, and that change was virtual staffing. I mean, basically the benefits were seen immediately, and you don't recognize our business compared to where it was 10 years ago. So when we decided to do this, we transitioned from in local staffing to virtual staffing. We literally transitioned 45 employees over about a 2-year period of time. We kept the top 5 employees that we had, and they're all managers today for our company. They're still with us. That transition suddenly provided us with a new resource that could have we could have an abundance of qualified candidates willing to work. And I should have italicized or underlined that. They are willing to work. And they are qualified and they're educated. And their ability to learn and succeed at each role provide us with a resource that we can't do without anymore. We've become accustomed to it. These new resources, the staffing that we're talking about, remote staffing, they're sticking around. They don't leave, and they grow in knowledge and capability and competence, as it should be. We shouldn't be having to constantly retrain people for positions that are recently vacated. It's nice to have people that stick around. And it's providing us qualified employees without the high cost of quality employees. And that's been a big benefit. So almost immediately, my overhead plummeted, profits soared, and our employees felt less overburdened. And that was within months of making this transition. So therefore, our work-life balance improved. So some of the outcomes that we immediately started to recognize and plan for since that point is we started a sleep diagnostic center, as I mentioned, which is completely operated by our remote staff. Our team has been on board since day one, doing all the intake and billing. This led to the creation of another company, which is Tactical Back Office, which is our staffing agency. And it's all started with a friendly competitor down in Fresno that I was talking to one day, and he wanted to partake in it. So we talked a little bit, and that was where TBO was born. And since then, we've been able to help hundreds of healthcare facilities and companies nationally with this new business model. And that's a joy to do that. What are the advantages of this zero risk workforce? Some of the disadvantages of locally recruited in-house and front and back office teams are expensive. That's number one, a disadvantage. Virtual staffing allows businesses to reduce overhead quickly and significantly. And that is noticeable from the first employee. Whether you hire one person or 20, you will see a significant difference in your payroll. By outsourcing, or what I like to call insourcing, providers can focus on resources on core business activities and customer care. And let me explain insourcing. I call it insourcing because truly I'm being provided staff that are dedicated to me. I'm not sharing them with another company. They're not providing a service to take care of something for me like billing. This staff member is mine, so if they succeed, I can promote them. If they're smarter than what I gave them credit for in the beginning, I can move them to a more difficult role like posting or quality assurance. So truly it's insourcing. It also reduced employee costs, which meant better management of my business for me, and then direct access to skilled professionals without the added cost of administrative burdens. And what I mean by that is direct access to skilled professionals is these are folks that are trained, that are coming to me with a few weeks of training under their belt, in this case, 8 weeks, and I don't have to do all the training and repeat that training over and over again every time there's a vacancy. It also provides with a reliable workforce that's always available during my business hours. So whether I'm in California, Hawaii, or New York, they're going to work my hours, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, or whatever those hours are. It ensures continuity of services and reduces the risk of disruptions. And as all of us on this webinar know, in the old days when we would have an employee leave, we'd be scrambling. If we were fortunate enough to have a 2-week notice, we would have to scramble to advertise, interview, go through the onboarding process, do the orientation, do the on-the-job training. It's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months before that person's back up to speed. And we're catching up all the while, all the work that has not been done on that position. This ensures not only the possibility of adding redundancy, but having a constant resource for onboarding new personnel. And it gives us greater access to a larger pool of highly educated, qualified staff, which is very beneficial. Not having to go out there and find them, but they're there ready to go. So how does this lighten the load for the owner or the HR manager or the managers? Well, it's less time managing staff and teams right off the bat. You don't have to manage them as intently as you used to. That's been our experience. Frees up valuable time and resources by handling recruitment, training, and management of front and back office staff. That's handled by the third party, by the staffing agency for technical back office, our company. That actually is handled. We do all that for you. It cuts the time and expense of training new employees. Tactical back office puts them through 8 weeks of training. So really all you have to do is just orientate them to your policies and procedures, how you handle patients and what referrals you accept, what insurances you accept. Those basic 1 to 2 day of training, and they're off and running. You don't have to explain what CMS is, what Medicare is, what a prior authorization is, what all these things do. All those are handled for you, which makes it a lot easier when you're onboarding virtual staff. Provides an expertise and flexibility needed to stay competitive, which that is a lot of flexibility when you can just have on-demand personnel for the workload that you have. And then ensures your staff will be well prepared to handle challenges and requirements as soon as they start the job. So like I said, within 2 days, they're pretty much fully up to speed and off and running. Once they go through your orientation process, they're good to go. It allows you an opportunity to have somebody that is on demand, basically. Within a week or two, you can have somebody who's been trained and knows how to do the job. And with those training programs, you want to make sure that you're looking at somebody that's got a real live environment. Sandbox is okay and virtual environments are okay, but unless you're talking to the American healthcare patient or the American medical assistant at a doctor's office, you really don't have a good grasp on what the attitude is out there. And that's something that we've been able to provide. So real examples of an effective virtual staffing agency, these have been our experience or our client's experience. We do, in fact, have a 1% turnover rate, which is reduced from a 40% turnover rate in 2015. A lot of people don't believe that number, so be it. It is, in fact, 0.68 at our last count last month. And that's because we're trying to keep these folks with us. We're adding benefits to them to keep them with us, where they have an environment that they work in that they enjoy and that they have a good work-life and balance. I think this is a huge number, 99% retention rate during the pandemic. We didn't lose hardly anybody. We were able to keep our doors open. We were able to keep orders flowing, the faxes being handled, the phones being answered. During the pandemic, 99% of our personnel stuck around. Where we didn't have any disruption with having a transition to a work from home environment. All of our personnel with TBO work from home. And we set them up at home with the security needed to keep their network secure and the training needed to watch out for any attacks. But working from home environment has proven to be very valuable to us. And it allows our companies to have the security of knowing that we have got the same personnel today than we will have tomorrow. 100%. We don't have any great resignation. We don't have any quiet quitting. We don't have that sense of entitlement, of inflated self-worth, and we sure as heck don't have ghosting of interviews. And especially after we go through that process of training in 8 weeks, that's rarely heard of, if at all, with our clients. Our businesses have doubled in size since the beginning of the pandemic, but yet our payroll has gone down. And then I think probably the most important, which all of us can relate to, is the positivity rate on our surveys. It's 90%. So we have 5 answers. 3 of them are, average, better, or best. The other 2, not so much. And 90% of our feedback surveys come in at that good, better, or best rating, which is unheard of, and we didn't even think possible. But the fact that we are getting those prove that this is not only a good model, but allows us to increase our patient satisfaction ratings. So for the folks on this call, where do I start? Where do I even get started with something like this? And you want to, whether it's one of our companies or Tactical Back Office or a competitor out there, you want to just make sure they're laser focused on delivering exceptional healthcare services. And by what I mean by laser focus is that all they do? Or are they trying to be a jack of all trades and a master of none? Something you want to decide for yourself if that's worth pursuing. Do they have an in-depth understanding of your needs? Are they taking the time to understand what you actually are asking for? Because usually it goes beyond just a part person. Usually, especially in small business, which we cater to, it's a part person, a CMN person, someone who can answer the phones and do web, social media, or instant message at the same time. Are they listening to that, and can they handle that? Are they willing to listen, learn, and adapt to your evolving needs? So what you need today is not what you're going to need in 6 months. Again, if you're a small business, you can understand that and have the right services and people to solve those challenges. I love this one. This is near and dear to my heart because I've farmed part of my business out before, and they usually tell me what they're going to do. I can't dictate to them how I want it done. So are they telling you what policies you're going to follow, or are you giving them the instructions and they're following your lead and following your policies and culture? That's an important question to ask, because are they willing to adapt to what you need? And are they flexible enough to serve small independent providers with customized solutions? It's another important aspect. Do they have a commitment and experience to help you transition from an in-house local workforce to a remote staffing model? That is difficult. It's not impossible, but it's challenging. It takes a lot of brain power to think about that. We've got 8 years of experience doing that, and we are more than happy to get on the phone and flesh things out so you have a clear path forward on how to transition from in-house to a remote staffing model. And then what is their training process? And I think that's important. Most companies will allow for a couple weeks training, which is basically an orientation. Whereas with TBO, we put them through 8+ weeks of training. You can't train QA in 2 weeks. You cannot train a biller in 2 weeks. You cannot train posting in 2 weeks. It takes in-depth training to get that person up to speed. Unless you're willing to take on the training yourself, which a lot of clients don't want to, it is important to ask that question. What's their training process look like? So those would be some of the starting questions. So in summary, our healthcare industry is facing unprecedented challenges, which again, I'm preaching to the choir. You already know that, you live it. And the way we approach that staffing and back office support must adapt and keep pace, which we moved to the remote model to handle that. So virtual staffing is not a trend. People have been using virtual staffing since the 90s when it started with the tech industry. A lot of the payers are already using virtual staffing or services that promote that have that staffing model. So we're not the first ones. We're probably the last ones to the show on how to use this model in our business to remain not only competitive but profitable. The right partner will reduce costs and improve efficiency and allow you to focus on what matters most. And that's what it's done for us. It's allowed us to focus on the customer, listen to the customer, what the business needs are, be available for our personnel that's doing the work, and allows us to expand. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's why we got in business in the first place. And you're not alone. There's a whole community of healthcare providers that we've helped. There's hundreds out there that we've personally helped not only provide this remote staffing solution, but help them grow their company and plan accordingly how to expand their services using a remote staffing model. So lastly, I'd just like to say we can move forward with confidence with this information. It is a solid business model that you can use in your own business. Start off with one person and using the strategies we've discussed today, and it will create a more sustainable future, and you will be happier as a result. We've proven that to ourselves time and again, and it's definitely a good business model that we can follow. So I want to thank everybody for their time today, and thank you for attending. And I'll give it back to Lori so we can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Todd. To submit a question during this Q&A session, please use the window on the right on your screen. We're going to get to as many questions as we can, but if we don't get to answer your question during this live event, we can certainly work to answer it offline. And again, if you are viewing this on demand and not as a live event, you can still ask questions that we will pass along to the tactical back office team to get answers for you. Okay, so with that, let's start right in, Todd. I'm going to start with kind of a general question, just to make sure I'm understanding this. And I want to talk about how the staffing industry is changing, particularly in the home medical equipment, healthcare, durable medical equipment industry. If I understood you correctly, is it fair to say that regardless of how small or big your company is, as an HME supplier, you are probably either having staffing challenges now or you can expect to have them going forward? Is that fair?
Yes, that's been our experience. As a HME provider, that's been our experience. And we have you don't even have to have challenges. Even if you seem to be full staff today, planning for the future, do you want to go through that application process? Advertising on Indeed is expensive. Advertising in general anymore is very expensive. And to do it repetitively, it gets burdensome. And so planning for the future growth or future absences, even maternity leaves and things like that, using a remote staffing model, you can use that to fill the gaps of where you may where you may have those expected needs later.
Okay, so it doesn't even, I shouldn't even be thinking, I guess, as a supplier, that if I can grow my business to this size, then I will outgrow staffing challenges. If I'm hearing you correctly, the staffing challenges are pretty much here to stay, correct?
That's been our experience and what we've seen over the past few years, especially during the pandemic when the government was handing out free money. People didn't need to work. If anybody's advertised for want ads, I'll use an old term, during the pandemic, we only got maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 applicants. That was it, because nobody needed to work. That was painful to see that. Now, of course, we get more applicants today, but the quality of applicants or the willingness or the people that will, drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, on our culture and do what we need them to do to be successful leaves a lot to be desired. So with this remote staffing model, we can fill in the gaps to where we lack locally.
Okay, great. So I was actually setting this next question up based on how you answered. So what are you seeing as far as the most critical staffing challenges of small and medium-sized businesses? Are you finding their staffing challenges to be different than larger businesses' challenges?
We service both large and small businesses, and their staffing challenges are identical. The number one compliment I get from our clients is the fact that our remote staffing show up on time and get to work. And that it's not even cost savings. Cost savings is second. And that surprised me because we initially did this years ago as a cost savings measure to fit those reimbursement cuts and those increases in minimum wage. But he's right. We've experienced that. Them showing up at 8:30 and starting to work, that was pretty impressive. Not 8:15, or I'm sorry, not 8:45 or 9 o'clock. If they start shift at 8:30, they're there at 8:30. That was pretty impressive. So I believe from what my experience has dictated that we have a lot of opportunity to fill in the gaps with remote staffing, and not to mention just the sheer amount of time, effort, and money and letdown that we have during that process of actively advertising and hiring and interviewing and scheduling appointments. And that doesn't no guarantee that they're going to show up on the first day either, because how many people on this call have hired somebody and you expect that on the 6th they're going to show up at 8 a.m. and you don't hear anything and you call them and go to voicemail. It's very discouraging. So with the remote staffing model, you get right to business of what you need to get done.
Well, that's a good point, because we tend to think that maybe if we're hiring entry-level employees, that if they walk out the door quickly or they ghost us and they don't show up at all, that's really where we're kind of hurting in that entry level. But it sounds like what you're saying is that has ripple effects through the whole company, and especially with small and medium-sized businesses, that if you're having trouble with retaining or recruiting and retaining those entry-level folks, that's going to ripple all the way up to your managers, correct?
It does do that, but even your experienced folks, I'll give you a Medicare aging biller. That's a tough position to fill, and there are not too many out there, especially working in HME. So when you need that position, if you use a remote staffing model like we do, we'll use tactical back office for one of our other companies and tell them we need a Medicare biller, and in 8 weeks, they've already been training somebody. So literally next week or the week after, we have a Medicare biller. I don't have to do anything more other than take 3 minutes to email them and tell them what I need. And with that, not to oversimplify it, but it's just not the frontline folks or taking hospital orders or intake orders or processing walkers or anything like that. It can be complicated roles. I've had companies use our team to bring their billing back in-house, because not only is it more of a price-sensitive issue, but when you do the math, you can use these folks elsewhere. So if you bring your billing team in-house and now you've got inventory to do, you can use a couple of them for inventory. If you have a special one-day shindig going on, you can use them to help set that up. Just like any other employee, you can use them in other areas as you see fit. Whereas if you farm out your billing to a third-party biller, they do one thing, and one thing probably pretty good, and that is billing, and that's it. But you can't utilize or cross-train those people for other tasks, especially for a small business when that's needed.
Okay, thanks. Next question, Todd. As a California home medical equipment supplier, who I assume bills Medi-Cal and managed Medi-Cal providers for patient supplies equipment, do you use your TBO staff to handle that? If so, what is the timeline to train someone to handle the billing for these payers who can work independently?
So we do handle that. And matter of fact, one of our sister companies just went through the Medi-Cal reaccreditation process, and we just passed. It takes us about 8 weeks. That doesn't mean you, the client, waits 8 weeks. That means you wait a week or two. It takes us 8 weeks. So all of our folks, whether they're an operator answering the phone or intake of hospital discharges or QA or Medicare billing, we train them for up to about 8 weeks. Some a little longer, some a little shorter. So we have a constant pool of candidates that are ready to go when a client places an order. So usually within a week or two of placing an order or signing a contract, you're ready to do interviews at that point of your candidates that you're going to interview for that role. But we're training them in the background for about 8 weeks.
Okay. Follow-up question to that. Does your training, or the trainability, I guess, of these employees include having or learning product familiarity. For example, if you have a product niche like sleep or respiratory or mobility, is it possible for me to ask you for somebody who is especially trained or familiar with those particular niches, so they would know about prior authorizations, they would know the NCDs, that sort of thing?
Yes. So we have not only specialists in those areas, but we have client partners that they've asked us to handle urologicals. And so we have training modules and subject matter experts that have worked in that arena before, and they will train on that. So if you have a special need, whether it's urologicals or ostomy or resupply or breast pumps or anything like that, we have subject matter experts that train on that, and we can accommodate that. If you present something to us we've never heard of before or we haven't trained on before, we have a whole library to go to, and we've got some pretty good, smart people in the billing team, billing training team that can quickly figure it out. And I'll give you one other example of that. We've expanded into the physician space. We've never done physician billing before, but our folks figured it out, worked with some other people to get up to speed on the training of what that looks like. And now we have over 75 physician offices nationally that are using our services. So I ask our clients to challenge us because we want to learn more about how to accommodate your needs and make you successful. So challenge us if you have a product that you don't think we can do.
I like that. Follow-up question to that follow-up question. I saw, for instance, this morning I was writing up a story about the new face-to-face and the written order prior to delivery for hospital beds that's coming up.
Yep.
CGS administrator sent something out a couple of days ago. So when something like that happens and there is a change in the procedure, the process, the requirements, do you do ongoing training with your staff then so that they're aware of those changes?
So we do ongoing training primarily when it comes to network security. So you'll see ongoing training happening because once they've been placed with a client, they're the client's team member at that point. So we encourage the client to include that team member into their ongoing training, under their ongoing review and policy and procedure and equipment and handling patients and things like that, because they're a part of their team at that point. But the ongoing training that we provide is surrounding the network security and the making sure that there's no infiltrations of outside actors into our network, into their network. That's become very prominent after the Ukraine war when there was a fear about Russian interference and, of course, North Korean interference. So we try to stay on top of that. That seems to be a priority, and everybody agrees with that. But to answer your question specifically, our other companies that we own are on top of those changes, and those changes get fed into the training team, and they incorporate those changes in their ongoing training for each new batch that we hire.
Okay, so once you place your employees with a supplier, then you're going to encourage me as the supplier to treat those people, include those people in my Monday morning meetings or my Friday afternoon bulletins, wrap-ups, all that, so that you really are encouraging me to treat them like a member of my local staff. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Once we assign them to a client, they're basically yours to do with as you needed, where you need them, and we want them to be included. We do not want to be thought of as somebody in a smoke-filled dark room in some third world country. That's not who we are. You're going to know our team member's name. You're going to get to know their strengths and their weaknesses. You're going to know their likes and dislikes. Just like any other employee you've ever hired or worked with, you're going to get to know them a little bit. We want the same thing with these. We encourage video conferencing, at least in the beginning, so you can get to know them a little bit better. Because there's sometimes you're in a meeting and facial expressions give you your answer, it's just not verbal. But they are part of the team, and we want them to be part of the team, and we strongly encourage that.
I love that because it's you're treating them like they're remote employees, which I guess that's exactly what they are, right?
Right.
But still part of your team, not just like this other group, but the team members who are going to be incorporated into any of your policy changes, or hey, everybody, CGS said that we've got next week, in fact, we've got new rules for these 3 HCPCS codes for hospital beds. And you would just include them in your staff meetings to update all of your local staff, right?
Absolutely. And so, for example, if somebody's working QA or posting and that documentation's needed, or they're sending out the billing, they need to be up to speed on all of that information, and you want them included in that. Like I mentioned, our DME company, the whole company, with the exception of 5 employees, is ran by our TBO team. Everybody, billing, QA, intake, operator, dispatch, everybody, and it works. You want that team environment. And so this is how, through video conferencing, this is how we communicate on our meetings. 10 years ago, we would all gather in the meeting room and have a meeting, right? Or we'd all gather in a certain area or the back office or something, and we would have a meeting face to face. But today, we don't do those face-to-face meetings anymore. We do them virtually on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and everybody from all different parts of the globe will join, and we'll have a common goal or common topic that we talk about. And that's how we do our meetings nowadays, through Zoom or Microsoft Teams. We don't do in-person meetings anymore.
Right. Oh, that makes so much sense. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Is there such a thing as a zero benefit workforce? And if there is, how would that work?
So I think what that means is zero risk, and zero risk is, as the client, all the risk is on us, not you, because we are the ones who are now hiring, vetting, orientation, training, in some cases cutting loose. I can guarantee you, in training, our turnover rate is not 1%. It's much higher than that. But that's what we're doing during that 8 weeks, is we're vetting people to make sure they're good candidates. By the time they reach the client, we've had 8 weeks to view their habits and if they're going to work out for that role that we're placing them with. So the zero risk part is the part that the client actually gets to live, and that is they don't have any risk of any of that. All they're asking through our staffing agency is, I need this, I need a hospital discharge oxygen person. I need a CPAP setup coordinator. I need a scheduler. I need somebody to process my resupply. I need somebody to call my patients, see if they need supplies once a quarter, and ship out those supplies. That's what I need. We'll supply that person at no risk to the client. And to take that a step further, let's say, because it does happen, there's 1% out there that it happens with, and that is, let's say somebody starts and a month later they don't work out, or they left, or they go home, they say they put in notice for maternity leave or something like that. Then we will find somebody to cover for that. All the risk is on us to find people to make sure that you are covered with the staffing needs that you have. You don't have any risk of that. You're not going to lose out on anything other than a little bit of time.
Okay, I understand. Zero risk. Okay, so the samples that you gave, like I need a CPAP setup person, that's really quite specific. That's very, very nichey. So if I'm a DME supplier and I am basically interviewing for a partner to work with, is that the sort of adaptability and kind of niche expertise that I should be expecting? That if I ask for a scheduler or CPAP setup person, that my partner should be able to accommodate that?
They should be able to accommodate that. And quite frankly, they should be able to accommodate those types of roles easily. Where we get into challenges, and good challenges, not bad ones, is when they ask for something that we have no idea what exactly they're asking for. And I'll give you an idea. They want a respiratory therapist to handle patient contacts after the CPAP setup to assure that they have compliance met. So in the first 90 days after a CPAP setup, we need a respiratory therapist to go in there. Now, we don't have stateside respiratory therapists. We have Philippine respiratory therapists, so they're not licensed, but each state is a little different. So for example, California You only need a license if you're going to change the setting on a CPAP or touch a patient. Well, in a remote staffing environment, nobody's ever going to touch anybody, so that's eliminated right there. And for changing the CPAP setting, you would need a respiratory therapist, a local one. But everything else beyond that, all the follow-up, all of the patient interviews, all of the patient education, the adherence to the compliance is what I'm trying to spit out. All of that can be done by a clinical person elsewhere. So we have respiratory therapists, companies that are asking for respiratory therapists to handle all of that. When the Respironics system went away, their patient adherence management system, PAMS, that went away. People were asking for respiratory therapists so they can do their own. You don't need to be licensed to do that, although they are licensed, but just not in the 50 United States. So those types of challenges were fun because we got to work through those and get those people situated to where now we're offering those to our clients. And it's working out wonderful for them because now they have a clinically trained person helping that patient through those initial days of CPAP compliance.
Right. Oh, I love that you can be that specific with your requests. Okay, next question. How is the training process for virtual staffing agencies evolving to meet client needs, and are they as reliable with their jobs and responsibilities as local staff?
Well, our experience, and I can only speak to our experience and the experience with some of our clients, the local staff aren't that reliable, generally speaking. You do find little nuggets of gold once in a while, but that revolving door, that sense of entitlement, all those things I discussed earlier, it's not that reliable. I've had issues with respiratory therapists, to be honest with you, that are not very reliable. The training has evolved to where we can handle any new, like this new mandate that you talked about regarding the hospital beds. That's the evolving right there. It's evolved to where our clients are asking for more specific needs. We need to get trained up on that and then pass that training on. Last year on our YouTube channel, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see Katrina Kennedy. We hired a train the trainer to come in and train our training team, which has become more robust, on how to train people and the tools that they have at their disposal and the tools that they need to do that properly. So it is constantly evolving in that regard because we are looking at refining that training process, and we want to provide you, the client, with somebody who can hit the ground running. It's only going to take you a day or two to kind of get them up to speed to your local needs, and then that's it, done. They're off and running. You don't need to train anymore, or you don't need to do anything much other than day-to-day check-ins. So evolving is a good word. I'm glad somebody used that because that's something that we're always doing, is evolving our training program to make sure we're meeting the customer demands.
Well, it sounds like from what you've been saying that training really needs to be one of my deciding factors when I am selecting a staffing partner. So can you give me a couple of examples, or maybe one example of questions that I should be asking a potential staffing partner? It sounds like, for instance, I should perhaps ask how much training do they get, and do they get training on factors such as HIPAA, so that I don't have to do that when they join me. Does that sound about right?
It does. And every company is different, whether it's a direct competitor or indirect competitor that we have out there. From what I've seen, they all train a couple weeks, which is fine. It's more than what we've done really as an industry to begin with. We take it a little further than that because we have to feed our own companies, our own sister companies, our own DME companies. We want them fully trained. I don't want to devote a trainer or somebody to take time out of their day to do the training other than basic orientation. So we have found what benefits us there is just to have a pool of people that we can draw from when a new position becomes available. So right now we're hiring folks to fill that role, and I want to know that I don't have to do much to it. So that's why we're spending so much time on training. That is an important aspect to our other companies, so they don't have to do a lot of trainings. That's the number one thing I would ask. And we invest a lot of time into our training process to where we can provide quality people up front, and we don't have to do anything else. Another question that I would ask is, are they willing to adapt? What if I have a special need of, that respiratory therapist? Are you hiring those? Or what about a QA? QA is a difficult position. That's as difficult, if not more difficult, than a biller. What kind of positions are you hiring for QA, and can you handle a QA role? Those dispatcher clients gave us the idea of dispatchers. We got about 2 years ago, a client came to us, says, "Hey, I got a fleet of trucks. I need a dispatcher out there to help manage these orders going out to the technicians." Since then, we've got about 30 companies that have dispatchers assigned to them because they have more than multiple trucks out there on the road, and they need someone to handle that. Let me give you a little tidbit on dispatchers. Dispatcher was the #1 cause of our decline in complaints because that dispatcher handled the communication between the patient, the referral, the technician on the road, and intake all at once. They were a hub of communication, and our complaints just went down immediately after hiring for that role because they're the ones on the phone all the time talking about, we don't have a commode today to deliver, we'll have a walker tomorrow, we're going to be an hour late, we're going to be an hour early, whatever the case may be. That was their main role, and that was probably one of the best positions that we learned from our clients to start promoting out there with our other clients.
Now, that's really interesting that maybe you might have thought that the problem was with delivery or something like that. And it turned out to be when you had the right dispatchers, well-trained, the right number, that actually took care of a whole lot of other problems.
Yep, a lot of communication, absolutely.
Okay, Todd, last question. Is it fair to say that Medicare funding hasn't kept pace with minimum wage increases since 2015, and that payers are not taking this into account, and that is the new normal that we should be working with?
This is absolutely the new normal. It's made a difference from us closing our doors in 2016 and keeping them open. And payers, they just recently reduced reimbursement by letting some of the COVID benefits expire. So there's some markets out in the United States that had to go through another reimbursement cut. And it gets daunting after a while. We should at least be able to maintain a living. And it's hard to do so with American workers because they're so costly. And with reimbursement the way it's been looking, and it's not going to go up anytime soon, I don't anticipate it ever going up. That's the mental attitude we have to have in order to survive. So with that attitude in mind, using a virtual staffing model in the majority of our businesses throughout the majority of our companies that we own, that's the way to conduct business, because then we have a fighting chance at being profitable and surviving and striving rather. It's going to be, there's no other way to do it. It really isn't. There may be some companies out there that are making money on something else that is supplementing that. Like there's some companies that own a different type of business that is more profitable and they can afford local workers or need them because they need patient contact. But for what we do in HME DME, it's really the only model that's out there that's going to let us thrive.
Okay, thanks so much, Todd. We wanted to share also that Tactical Back Office does have a YouTube channel, so you can tune in there for additional videos. We're just about out of time today, but before we officially sign off, I'd like to remind you that this webinar will be available for watching on demand. Within the next day or so, please look for an email from us that will direct you to the webinar archive, which you can view again or pass along to a colleague. My thanks to Todd Usher for being our presenter today, and thank you to Tactical Back Office for sponsoring our presentation. For HME Business, thank you for joining us today. We all wish you a great afternoon.
Thank you, Lori.